My name is Jenny Crook. I am coming from the Portland, Oregon WISE office, and WISE is based out of the Pacific Northwest. So we have offices in Oregon, Washington, and we do partner with states and across the country. Like Corbin said, our focus really is around training and technical assistance um, on employment for folks who experience intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we have a lot of different partners and we do a lot of different things, but it's all really centered around employment for folks. And that is why I'm here today, is to share some of the job development strategies for employment professionals that have proven to be true. I am here to say that this is not anything that I personally came up with, right? These are like time tested strategies and techniques. And I'm here to share my experience with them, as well as the experience of utilizing these when working with other agencies. So thank you for having me. And I know we have an hour, so thanks for joining me for your lunch hour. And we'll just jump right in. So um, today we are going to be looking over our first section is going to be around the employment professional best practices. And that really is meaning, regardless of what your title is, what I mean by employment professional is someone who is utilizing job development techniques for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are looking for community integrated employment. So I know there's lots of different titles in lots of different places. So you could be an employment professional, employment consultant, job developer, whatever your title is, we're talking about that role. So I hope you are in that role with us. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So when you think about the employment professional's role in this process, it's really about becoming a consultant, right? Becoming a consultant to provide information around what are the benefits and then also the resources for employers when you're looking at supported and customized employment. So the idea is to engage the employer, build a relationship, identify a business need, and offer a solution to meet that need. So when you're thinking about connecting with businesses, which is a large part of an employment professional's role, right? It's getting to know the folks that you are supporting and then also the business community. So really thinking about what are those ways that you do connect with the business community and how does that fall under your role? So thinking about how best to use the services that you provide, as well as referrals to other connections within the business community, the features and benefits of your agency, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's really about building relationships with employers and fostering partnerships. So it's kind of that ongoing process, right? So it's that getting to know the job seekers you represent, their strengths, gifts, capacities, and then that networking and continuous job development that we all know is there, right? So it's always something that you can be doing more on. So thinking about that role is kind of twofold. And job development really is about honing in and you're providing advice and resources to businesses, but your primary resource are the folks, the job seekers that you're representing, right? So in order to do that well, you really got to know the job seekers you're working with. So you have to know what their skills are, what their interests are, what their abilities are, so that then you have that information and you can really dig in and make sure that you're seeing where this person is going to be a good fit And then you're building those relationships with employers to see if their needs happen to match what one of your job seekers' skills, interests, and abilities are. So really it's that kind of that win-win that you're looking at. Um, and when you're thinking about job development, it's also staying informed on what's happening in your local business communities. Um, you want to be seen as someone who can provide information and resources, and you don't want to be seen as someone who is just trying to be in that sales role of trying to connect for jobs all the time. I mean, ultimately, that is the goal, right? Is to get a placement. But really, along that process, it's about building that relationship, and then it's really making it a priority in your daily activities. So I will say that when I first started doing this work, and I've worked as a job coach and an employment specialist, and then I managed a program of job coaches and employment specialists, and it was really easy to, the first thing to go in your calendar is that job development time where you just kind of set that aside, because you have meetings that have to take place at a certain time. You have all of your reports that need to get done, your billing, all of those things. But it's really, really important to make sure that's a priority in your daily activities. And so, add that time to your calendar and prioritize it, just like all the other things, because it takes time. We all know that as well, that it takes that determination and time to build relationships, whether you're building it with a business partner or whether you're getting to know your job seekers. So making that a priority. And one of my lovely colleagues, Deborah McLean, she always says that job development is not an armchair sport, right? It really is about going out and doing it. It's about going out and making those connections. So really kind of thinking about job development as a continuous, active process is really what helps when you're thinking of framing this work that we do. So just kind of thinking about, like, what is job development? What does that look like? So here is a nice little diagram that kind of sums up walking through job development. So the top boxes are the things that you would typically do with your job seekers. So you might have a person-centered plan, and then you might be doing some discovery activities as you're getting to know your job seekers, and then moving on to creating marketing materials for them. So their video resume, their all of those things that they have. Do they need certificates? Kind of what does that marketing look like? And then you would move from that into community-based assessments. So you're letting folks try things, right? You're seeing really in action what works for them. And then that process, then while you're doing all of those, you're also with the business community, you're going to networking events, you're reaching out to folks that you know or haven't spoke to in a while. You're gathering information, you're doing your online research, you're checking out what's happening in the local business community, what new businesses are opening, what partnerships are happening. Then you're engaging those employers, you're reaching out, you're looking for more information, and you are starting to build that rapport with the employers, and enough to get in and do job tours and do a job analysis of what you're looking at. So ideally, you would be matching those job analysis that you're doing to the tasks and the jobs that your job seeker is interested in, to see if there's a fit. And then you're going to develop a job proposal based on all this information that you have, that eventually you're going to loop back in with the job seeker and do an interview, and then that person's going to be hired. So this looks very neat and tidy, right? Yes, you're like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not quite a linear process. That really depends on where your relationship with the employer already is. But these are the different kind of steps that kind of can happen as you're walking through. So ideally, if you're meeting like a new job seeker or you're new in an area, you would go through kind of this process, as opposed to if you for some employers, you might just go straight to engaging with them because you have, a mutual friend or something. So this is to be taken as, the process through getting to know businesses and getting to know your job seekers. But it really is, it's just the model to show what is possible. It doesn't mean that every job seeker that you're working with and that every employer engagement that you have is going to look this way. But if you're looking to start somewhere, this is a great model to kind of show what that can look like and what those steps are when you're walking through that. So again, it's that continual process. And you might be in that gathering information and engaging the employer for quite a while before you move on. So just know that there's no one right way to move through it, but this is the model of kind of looking at your job seeker and a business, and you want to be able to match those two. So thinking about, you know, engaging the employer, we all know that work looks really different right now. So, and depending on where you are, even so, I'm in Oregon. A lot of my colleagues are in Washington, and we have a different phases that we're in for pandemic shutdowns, and that changes, right? So it's, no matter where you're at or what that looks like at this time, work really looks different. You have considering of what that you have the safety precautions and the PPE, environments look really different. We're expected to behave differently when we're going out in the community, 6 feet apart, wear your PPE, all of those. And thinking about that, we're on, we're on Zoom all the time, right? We're connecting in different ways. So the connections are still happening. It just looks a little bit different. So definitely still connecting with employers and building that relationship is key, and it still can happen even though we might not be in person as much as before. And this bottom picture I love because that's how I feel all the time. I'm just one of those little boxes on Zoom, but I have amazing kitty coworkers who work with me, so that makes me feel much better throughout the day. And it's really looking at this is you're not going through this alone, right? Businesses, agencies all over the world are looking at how are we doing this work in a different way. So reaching out and finding new resources, as well as considering that digital divide for folks with disabilities, right? So the learning curve really was very steep. And then when you think about connecting with your job seekers, they may not have the same opportunities with technology. So what happened suddenly was that, someone that you would meet with on a regular basis, maybe at their job site, if they're not at their job site anymore, how are you still connecting with them? And so kind of looking at how do you bring in not only still engage employers, but still connect with and get to know your job seekers in this new kind of way of working. And then this is a great time if you haven't considered customer service, customer satisfaction surveys. Now is a really great time to do that. So, customer satisfaction surveys are, quick surveys that you would give to employers that you're working with or different partners, maybe funders, your job seekers, just to kind of check in where they're at and what might work for them. So, an employer that you may have a very set schedule of going in and checking in, and you already have this, that may change if you're no longer able to go in. So kind of reassessing what the needs of the folks that you're supporting are and that business community is really important now. So you can adjust what your services are because it all looks very different. That's yeah. And then Mr. Kevin Bacon kind of knows everybody in the world. That's 6 degrees of separation, but really staying connected right now, even though we are not in person as much. So the Merriam-Webster's definition of networking is the exchange of information or services among individuals, groups, or institutions Specifically, we're talking the cultivation of productive relationships for employment or business. So that's really what we're looking at. And I used to think, oh my gosh, considering networking is already hard now. Now we're on this digital platform, but really there's some really cool ways to still stay connected. And you're thinking about that active networking, right? So to keep something going on, you must reach out. So if now is a great time to kind of reconnect with your social capital, right? So who do you know that's in your circle? And who do you know that you haven't connected with for a while? This is a great time to kind of reach out to folks and reestablish, seeing how they're doing. How are they, maneuvering through the changes and providing services? What are their new challenges, right? And then sharing stories. So if it's a colleague, reaching out to kind of just check in. So now is a great time to do that. And when you're thinking about connecting with employers, it's really important when you're thinking of kind of networking and reaching out that the goal is that you're meeting and getting to know people with the kind of the goal really is that you may partner with them in the future. And thinking about partnering isn't just getting a job. So it's not that they're just going to hire someone that you work with. It really also is about, considering maybe they are someone who would allow you to come in and set up community-based assessments, or they might be willing to sit down and do some interview practice with some of your job seekers. So really consider what are those connections and partnerships that can happen along the way to a job. So I worked with this I was out doing, some job development, and I went into this sandwich shop, a local sandwich shop. They have a few of the locations around town, but they're franchised, so they're owned separately. So you really got to go and meet each person individually. And when I met the woman who was the owner and the manager, she had a really great kind of long-term crew, right? So she really wasn't looking for any employment, but she was so open to kind of discussing like her business and curious about what I was doing. And so we did partner for interview practice. I would connect with her and schedule a time and bring in job seekers so they would know like, hey, we're going to go in here and practice. It's definitely something, she's a manager who can provide really good feedback to you. And it was great. It was a really good partnership that she, and we're still kind of connected, even though she never hired anybody, but just thinking about what are ways that you can connect with businesses and you're building that long-term relationship. So it's not, that just takes time, right? That just really takes time. And it's the mutual benefits, right? So thinking about what are those things that you can provide them as well. So it might be, COVID resources. It might be that you have the scoop on what's new in town, right? So I'm just thinking about what you can provide to them as well as how they can assist you in your job. And then really looking at networking as a way to expand the number of employers that you're working with now or in the future, because that's kind of that continuous job development. And there's many groups to do this. So like I was saying, there's all sorts of fun stuff that has popped up. So local business or neighborhood community associations. So it could be your neighborhood association. So where my office is, there's a downtown business association that we're part of and did attend those meetings in person, now online. And then, thinking about like Chamber of Commerce, professional associations like APSE, so the Association of People Supporting Employment First. So really kind of looking at what makes sense for you and following your interests too. So if there's something that you're interested in and you're involved in, say, a sports club, a book club, something like that, it's cool to network there too, to kind of find out what do these people do, and then how can you guys potentially partner. And then embracing the technology, right? It's the learning curve, like I said, has really drastically shortened. When it was, this would be a great tool to learn, suddenly became, I have to learn this tool now to still be able to do my job. So looking at that, there's options that we're familiar with in our personal lives, right? So like the online shopping, I love that I can, go and fill up my cart at the local grocery store, and then I don't even have to go in. I can just drive in and have it delivered curbside. So looking at all of those things and the options for your personal life, all of these things have kind of become the norm when you're thinking about utilizing technology. So digital and contactless payments have really, ramped up. Telehealth has been more widely used, as well as distance learning. So stuff like this, we're like, we're seeing more webinars and things like that. So also something that's really great that has opened up. So there's good things about this as well, is so some of the really large museums in the world, like the Louvre, have opened up and done where you can come and do virtual tours. Like I may never visit the Louvre in real life, right? But that's amazing opportunity to do that virtually. So lots of folks are kind of utilizing that and thinking about how are we doing business different and how are we still providing services. And then the library, just thinking about all of those different things in your life that are happening. So what does that look like for work, right? We're doing a lot more virtual meetings, and we are connecting more and more in those senses and those places of still scheduling things and still being able to connect and be first face to face, but then also thinking about what does that look like for you as you're returning to work. Some people are in their offices, and some folks are still working from home, such as myself, from my home office. So just kind of thinking about embracing technology and what can that mean for work, since you have already probably done some of those things for in your personal life, right? So some tips for online learning, email or online life. So email is a part of business, right? And it has been, and it's a tool that job developers use every day. So perhaps you haven't given much thought to email etiquette until now, but we're going to go over some standards for kind of sending and replying to emails. But some of the email correspondence, really helpful now as people are getting more and more emails, to get really specific with the subject lines. And then add a signature block. If you don't already have one, make sure that your signature block has all the information that you would have on your business card. So it has your name, it has your email, your phone, it has, all of those things. It has your company website, it has your LinkedIn, any of those things that you might find. Adding that to your signature block is really a great way to keep it simple for folks who are looking to connect with you. And then you want to double check your work, right? We've all had those reply alls when it was meant to be a reply to that single person. And also with, proofreading emails before sending them, just those little things. Referencing the attachments. If you are attaching something, making sure to reference it and explain what that is. And then double checking to make sure that the reference or the attachments are actually attached. That's always a good one. And then most importantly, really, it's, responding to all emails received. So with business email etiquette, you're really looking at sending a response within, a 24-hour period to acknowledge an email, right? It doesn't mean that you're responding to say, I have the information, but really folks are moving really quick now. And so it's really helpful if you just respond to say, hey, I got your email. I'm going to look for that information and I'll have that back to you by such and such date. But really making sure that you're responding to emails and acknowledging them. Because a lot of folks now are, since we can't be in person as much, we're relying on kind of those multi-chain things. Whereas before, you might be able to just see someone in the hall at work and ask a quick question and be able to utilize that and move on, as opposed to now when it's a lot of kind of emails and going through that, right? And so virtual meetings, coming prepared, checking your background, making sure that it's appropriate, work appropriate, mute when not speaking, trying not to multitask. If you do, definitely getting off of camera, and then using the chat feature so that you're not always needing to unmute. We all know what happens when we get a call for like, everybody tell your, put in your thoughts, and then you have people speaking over each other. It's just a lot more work to kind of navigate that virtually. So thinking about utilizing that chat feature if you have a question. And all of those things are really just kind of a reminder that we're doing this work in a new way. And that life-work balance is really important. So having a dedicated workspace as much as possible if you're working from home. It could be that your dedicated workspace really is the other end of the couch, depending on what your what your living situation is. Making sure to take breaks. That's something that I still struggle with, is making sure that I stand up, move away from my desk. I feel like when you're in the office or during, when you're out doing appointments, you have regularly kind of built-in breaks where you're doing things. But if you're mainly working from home, you might need a reminder. And then sticking to a schedule, really not working past a certain time, because you need to make sure that just because your computer and your work stuff is there, you're still having time for yourself. And then reaching out to coworkers. It's really important to still kind of keep in that that connection with the folks that you work with. So we do that occasionally, just call someone to be like, hey, how's it going? I'm working on this, those updates. And it's all of those little things, that social interaction that you miss from being in an office and regularly meeting with folks. So just some thoughts about kind of trying to get yourself set up really well so that you can do good work. And then now we're going to look at some job development techniques that work, right? So number one is using a business perspective. Oh, Jasmine. Hi, Mr. See, coworkers, we have the cutest coworkers now, by the way. I just love it. So using a business perspective. And what I mean by business perspective is that, you're really looking at moving away from the old trope of businesses should hire folks with disabilities because it's the right thing to do. And we've moved on to businesses should hire folks with disabilities because that particular person with the disability actually is going to be a benefit to their business and they're capable of doing that work. So really kind of shifting what that looks like. And so you got to learn your features and benefits in order to be able to have that conversation and speak intelligently to employers about that so that you can convey what is the benefit, right? And becoming knowledgeable about how customized employment can benefit businesses. And then, what employer resources exist is really important. So using that business perspective really is that paradigm shift, moving from the charity model, as we would say, kind of that hire folks because it's the right thing to do, and more into hire folks because they are qualified individuals who are job seeking, so it's really kind of that shift in belief as well. So you should kind of propose a job seeker as a business solution only when that strengths, skills, and abilities match the business need. And then looking at being a consultant really also is striving to have that relationship with the business that you really have an advanced knowledge to know what their business needs are. So, for instance, if you have ever been in a situation where you've been trying to be sold something that you don't need, you know how frustrating that can be. You know, if you are, living in an area where there are no bodies of water anywhere near, and you're out on the desert plains and you have someone trying to sell you a boat, and you say, well, I actually am not in need of a boat. But they say, oh, but this boat is the best boat. I mean, it goes fast, it's amazing. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this person isn't hearing me. I literally have no need for a boat, right? So just kind of thinking you want to be not that boat salesman who's saying like, hey, working with folks with disabilities is amazing. It is, but you need to know what the needs are first. And then you want to be able to address those specifically. So considering using that business perspective, which is really just honing back into what are your job seekers' skills and abilities? So you have to know that. And then you have to know the business needs to be able to match those. But when you're approaching businesses, you're really utilizing that perspective of I'm here representing qualified individuals who are looking for work. So really considering what that is. And businesses are dealing with multiple issues, especially now. And so thinking about other ways that you can assist them, and maybe providing a resource about something that is new, or it's the best way to meet their need, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna hire someone with its disability. So for example, sharing how another business in the same industry solved the same issue they're having is a valuable information to share. So you're kind of you're sharing your expertise in a sense as well. So one of the really easy ways to use or to kind of implement that business perspective is shifting your language. So using language that is common to business. So for instance, saying slide deck versus PowerPoint, or when you're talking about assessments. So on that screen, or on the little Venn diagram, that was talking about assessments, but because we're talking to folks who are in the field. But if you're talking to a business about potentially doing an assessment there, you might want to use the terms like you're trying to determine work skills and career goals versus you would like to do a vocational assessment, because employers might not have any idea what that means. And then restructuring a position versus job carving. So in our field, when we're talking about customized employment, you're really looking at creating a new job description based on a business need and job seeker skills. But job carving is really unique to just our industry. So thinking about how you can get your point across by speaking that more common language, and then talking about funding versus vocational rehabilitation or waiver, any of those things that employers might be thinking, what is this, and do I have to know what this is, right? And then you get into the thing where you're having to explain more than you need to. So using your shifting your language is a really great way. So it's not only will you be more relatable, it's going to help the employer to understand what you mean. And so thinking about that when you're out talking to employers is great. So shifting your language is one. And then another one is it's all about the skills. So when you are utilizing a business perspective, you're really using a person's interests as a way to translate skills of daily life to work tasks. So you're wanting to think about those transferable skills. So if a person, a job seeker, is unloading the dishwasher at home and is helping to switch over the laundry, you look at what does it take to do those things, and then where might those skills be used in the community. So really looking at those transferable skills. So if you are good at organizing the job seeker who's unloading the dishwasher, they have, strength, they're able to kind of, match things, they are able to complete something from start to finish. You're really just looking at those things and thinking, what is it that the job seeker can do? And that is what you want to highlight. So the most effective way to represent job seekers is to describe them in terms of their skills and abilities. For example, if you are looking at, say you have a job seeker who is interested in using computers, and he on his own tracks sports statistics, right? So he has a spreadsheet that he's really a big sports fan. And he just is, this is his interest. He's really interested in keeping up on what are the stats and what are those kind of new things. So he's created a spreadsheet in Excel to catalog his favorite teams and players. He updates it on a weekly basis. And from that, you can look at the transferable skills and say, well, George is punctual, he is organized, and can create these spreadsheets. So he's really detail oriented. So it's really it takes practice, but thinking about what those skills are. Because again, when you're dealing with businesses, you're wanting to be able to highlight your job seekers in terms of what they can do and how they can benefit the business. So some other ways is you can do this through visual or video resumes where you're actually showing someone doing something. Some other language, it could be that Bob is punctual, he's creative, he's resourceful, reliable, can match colors and numbers. So really just kind of thinking about reframing someone's skills to how can this be a benefit to a business, and that's how you describe them. So it's really about focusing on those skills of a person. And then utilizing job restructuring. So, this job restructuring is kind of one of the tenets of customized employment. And I'll say that customized employment really is just looking at each individual job seeker, looking at what they can do, and then finding where that is a match for a business. So it's really about following those steps. So utilizing job restructurings. So the photo on the left, it is an old school doctor who would come and make his house calls, right? And the doctor would do everything. So he would have prescribed medicine. He would check, on things. He might give booster shots. So really looking at this doctor who is doing all of those things and how we've transferred those into multiple different jobs. So now when you are dealing with a doctor, you're also dealing with a nurse, and you're dealing with an anesthesiologist, and you're dealing with a radiologist, right? So really that whole process has kind of, made its way into professionalizing and really kind of honing in on skills. So that job, that big umbrella of being the doctor who kind of goes around, now has been restructured into a lot of other jobs. So thinking about that, it's really known as a main strategy used for job developers in customized employment, right? It's the process of creating something that wasn't there before, and looking at identifying specific tasks to be done within existing positions. And then you want to add tasks that don't get done or seldom get completed. So when you're thinking about, okay, so the nurse takes on some of those doctor roles, or those tasks that the doctor used to do, but then they have some of their own tasks that they now have been added on. And it's really kind of looking at that. So when you're looking at a business and you're seeing kind of what's happening in the business, job carving can only be accomplished once you've established that relationship with the business enough that you're able to go in and actually see what's being done. So you see see all the different jobs and tasks, and you can kind of recognize, oh, yes, here is something that, my job seeker can do that they have identified as a need. And then what are some of those other things that I can see that might be able to be taken from one area and added on? So if you're thinking about those, it's really those tasks being done inefficiently within existing positions, or it's those tasks that are never quite completed at the end of the day because the role that has that task has so many other things that's just the least priority, so it doesn't really get done. Also, adding tasks that are new. So Costco, we all know Costco for their samples, but also other stores in the mall. So there's been a study done, and it's Auntie Annie's, I believe, is one of them in Costco as well. So they have shown that when they have someone handing out samples of a product, sales go up by 300% in that time. So that's really, really effective. And I think that's why we still see that, is that is a strategy that they're utilizing to highlight a product. So that could be potentially something that is added into a job description that wasn't there before. So potentially for an hour of the day, your job seeker would hand out samples or do something like that. So it's something that wasn't happening before, but you can add in. So considering job restructuring as a way to help create efficiencies, and it's really about kind of seeing what the need is. So you're not going to come in and talk about job restructuring when you aren't very familiar with what that is. So some other examples are performing, limited clerical tasks, selling snacks to, people in their offices. I know downtown Portland, there are some restaurants that are nearby, and they are nearby a lot of the large office towers. So before most folks were working from home, we really loved the businesses who would say, okay, yeah, we're going to come and deliver, even though it's just next door. It's such a handy thing. So kind of considering how you can help with that. And then, how does that make sense for the business? So, thinking about what are those aspects of your own job description that you don't do, and then consider, I definitely don't excel at every single thing that is on my job description, right? So when you're thinking about job restructuring, creating a new kind of position, it's also a way not only to create this position for a person with a disability, but it's also a way to help increase efficiencies at the work. So thinking about your features and benefits, a feature is a fact of your service. So we have on-the-job supports, right? So that's your job coach. How does that benefit the business? Well, it means that you're going to have a more capable employee. And so what is that ultimately when a benefit, a feature meets a benefit? It's going to reduce hiring costs. So when you're thinking about having capable employees and dedicated employees, you have less turnover. So really looking at being able to think about these things. And here's a little cheat sheet for you to practice later, because it definitely does take practice. But looking at, these are some of the things that you can use when you're talking to businesses about your services. So a lot of agencies, so take the Promote Business Partners, a lot of agencies really will highlight the business partners on their websites or their marketing materials. So they'll have the store logo of the stores that have hired folks with disabilities from their agency. And that's no cost advertising for the business. So this is really just kind of a cheat sheet for you to study. But when you're thinking about any feature of your service, you really want to tie it to the benefit. Because again, if you're dealing with the business, it's really about what is the benefit to them and how can you be a consultant. So the employer engagement piece, Ron Zemke is someone who has written a lot about management theory. And this quote is spot on for kind of what we do. So every time customers come into contact with you, they come away feeling better or worse about it. It's how well you manage those numerous moments of truth every day that ultimately determines how successful you will be. So this really speaks to the idea that we have multiple customers, right? It speaks to the fact that we have our job seekers, we have the businesses that we work with, we have our funders. So thinking about how you can provide good customer service to all aspects. And it's really about developing a solid reputation as being someone who does what you say you're going to do and who follows through, right? So, the better your customers feel you're being treated, the better off your working relationships will be. So, as mentioned earlier, it's really about providing the excellent customer service, but it has to be tailored to where they are. So your funders are going to want different information than your job seekers or their families. So making sure that you're able to be flexible enough to provide that information. So friendliness goes a long way, even over the phone. So a smile comes through on your voice. You want to make sure that you're kind of keeping that along the lines, no matter who you're talking to, and no matter the situation, but really being able to listen and hone in to what each of the customers that you're providing services to is needing. So we have all those different hats. And then providing the resources, right? So providing resources is really about sharing your experience. So I mentioned before, it's where you are able to say, hey, we've worked with an agency similar to yours, or we've worked with a business, in the same industry as yours. And here's what we learned about that. Because we have this experience, right? It's talking about those new features. So what have you developed? Has your agency developed any new features that you can provide that are around COVID? So do you now provide safety assessments where you come in and you can kind of look around and say, oh, some of the other businesses that we're working with have implemented these things. So you might want to think about that. Updating your marketing materials, especially now when folks are really seeing a lot of stuff and getting emailed, so you're having less of that in-person connection. So updating your marketing materials to reflect any new changes and maybe refresh the photos. Now is the time to do that. And then become familiar with the resources outside of your agency. So for instance, kind of looking at what other information are businesses looking for right now. So here are some examples of some COVID-19 specific resources. So the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, they have a whole section around COVID-19. So they have a whole section of resources for businesses. As well as, if you're there, you might want to check out their definition of customized employment. The Career One Stop has an employment recovery section that has some great resources for employers. And then Occupational Safety and Health Administration, so OSHA, they also have some really cool COVID-19 resources. And then Jan. I love Jan. Jan is a great resource. So the Job Accommodation Network is a free service, and it has the site has specific COVID-19 information for businesses and for job seekers, but it also is a really great resource for employers in general, even outside of COVID-19, because they provides information around accommodations and different things. So it also has information around any type of accommodation that you could think of. So really another great resource to do research if an employer is looking for a specific thing. So thinking about what are those resources that you can share with employers that are new that they might not know. And the fact that job development, no matter what your role is, no matter what your title is, essentially, you are doing that all the time. So keeping the main thing the main thing. So Stephen Covey, who did Strength Finders and some of these different things, this quote, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing, right? So the idea is that we are all in the business of helping folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities find work in the community, right? That's really the main thing. So no matter what our position is within that, no matter how we do that, where we're at in that process, that's really what we are here to do. So keeping that as a main thing and making that a priority, that whatever you're trying to make decisions and kind of trying to navigate new situations, because we're in COVID and figuring out like, how do I connect with folks? Really that it is about recognizing the relationship with the employers and your job seekers don't stop. So it's that continual thing. And even once they've hired someone, right? So even if you get to that point where a business has hired one of your job seekers, the relationship isn't over, right? You still maintain that. So, you know, ongoing evaluations. So again, that the nice thing to put in with those, the satisfaction surveys. So that's another good tip if you want to develop one of those. But really maintaining relationships with employers, and then relationships don't end with a hire. So it's a continual process. So in review, job development really is most effective when you are looking at each job seeker as an individual, starting with their strengths, gifts, capacities, and then you are trying to match those to a place in the community. So really looking at it as an individualized, customized process. And then the techniques that work are really based on utilizing the business perspective and that continual process of job development. And then with employer engagement, how well are you able to talk to employers around what your features and benefits are, and then provide resources? So become familiar with local resources that you can provide to employers. So when you're thinking about employer engagement, please continue to think about ways that you can partner that are outside of just hiring. Ultimately, that's our goal, right? But you also want to kind of foster those relationships as they're going. So when you're looking at that, business needs change and you want to continue to offer solutions and resources. So that is my quick 1 hour kind of intro into and sharing of my experience. This photo is taken from a hospital where they had some kitties roaming around, and they're having their own meeting. So, they're continuing their networking even into their kitty days. So thank you. And I just want to, before we go to questions, I just want to highlight that, again, I'm Jenny Crook with WISE. You can go to our website, gowise.org, and we have trainings that are available for free at no cost to you for folks who are outside of Washington. So currently we have a boots on the ground series that's going on. I'm running that series. It's going really well. You're able to join in on a Tuesday seminar where you get some information and then come back on Friday for a workshop. It's really geared towards employment professionals. But so that is happening now. You can also check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then our YouTube channel also has a lot of success stories and some examples of some video resumes if you want to check those out. So thank you again.